holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up for brekkie, lunch, or dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. They just drop them at your door, people. You'll save time and eat well. You'll stay on track with your healthy lifestyle while taking all of your holiday to-dos in stride with good meals in the tum-tum. If you're too busy with all this stuff, these meals are easy to get done. They taste great. All you've got to do is head over to factormeals.com/expandingreality50 and use code expandingreality50 to get 50% off. That's code expandingreality50 at factormeals.com/expandingreality50 to get 50% off.
A choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this episode, Jacob Proctor. He has degrees in geological science, physical anthropology, and he has his master's in carbonate geology. Guys, we have an awesome conversation. If you're into nerding out on planet science and talking a little bit about UFOs, but not too much, but a good amount, then this is the episode for you. Jacob is an old friend of mine. The last time I saw him, we were cliff diving, and he was teaching me how to throw rocks in the water ahead of me so that I didn't split my feet open, which was fun. So he's a very interesting guy, has some phenomenal stories. So without any further ado, Jacob Proctor. All right, good friends out there in the listening world, ladies and gentlemen, a good special episode today. We have an old blast from the past of mine, Jacob Proctor, on the show. He's going to talk about some amazing stuff. This dude, when we met back in the day, I was like, this guy right here is going to do some amazing shit. And here you are doing amazing shit. So for my audience that doesn't know you, go ahead and just tell us a little bit about you, man.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Brandon. It's last time I remember seeing you, it was you were playing a show for at Little Woodrow's, I think, and man, it's always good memories going back there. But so my name is Jacob Proctor, and I studied geology undergrad at University of Texas. I did geology, physical anthropology, and then later went on to do my master's in carbonate geology, where I ended up doing a lot of work into earth and atmospheric sciences in this sort of area. So going out to Belize, evaluating reefs, trying to understand how climate change is impacting the integrity of the reefs. And then sort of in between the grad school and all that, it was, I was working in the energy sector as well. So that was kind of what fueled all the directions that I ended up going,
It's amazing. And yes, and the last time I remember seeing you, I don't remember that show. Unfortunately, when I played, I don't know if you remember, I was a little 3 sheets to the wind pretty much by the first song. So
yeah.
But you were always there, man. We always hung out and had good parties down there in Houston. So when the last time I saw you, though, that I remember was when we went camping. Do you remember that? And we did the cliff jumping?
Yeah, that was in Pace Bend. I remember that as well.
Yes, and you had your buddy there, the Army guy, right? Was he in the Army or the Marines?
Yeah, it was Kyle Lopres. He was Marines.
Okay, I'd only met him the once. We hit it off. He's great. He's gigantic. And what I remember that just sticks out in my mind about you, man, besides the fact that you've always been cool shit, you've always been very sweet and interesting, and that's what we're going to get into tonight. But what I wanted to say, though, was when we were up there on that cliff, it was like, what, 80 feet, something like this, massive, right? Or was it that big? Or am I?
Yeah, no, I think it was, 60, 70 feet. It was definitely up there. I mean, it was tall that day for sure.
Yeah. And you got some cliff diving or some rock diving experience where? Because you just
it was in Yeah, I mean, with Kyle, we had gone down to Greece and gone cliff jumping off on the island of Corfu, and it was pretty wild. There was a rock climber there that he was saying, look, if you're going to jump from this height, you have to throw something in front of you to break the water. And you probably remember that. But yeah, so I mean, we went cliff diving there, and then we went to an even bigger cliff, which was in France, in the Gorge de Verdun. And that was pretty crazy. I mean, they had this gorge it was very straight, and along the sides, you could actually walk up the strike in the rock. At the layer of the rock, you could actually walk right up it. And so you could get really high. And so that was pretty intense. I remember we kept kind of pushing each other a little bit higher and higher. And
yeah, as you do,
we got up to some pretty extreme heights. I think at some point we hit around 80, 90 feet. It was really, really up there. It felt very high at the time anyway.
Yes.
And in the pictures.
Oh God, yeah. And this is what I remember about you. So we were up there on this gigantic cliff, whatever, and you said that. You turned around and grabbed a rock, I mean, about the size of a dinner plate, and you were like, oh, grab your rock. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then you told me about how you have to break the water and then jump in because it's like slamming into concrete if you don't. And I was just like, damn, this is both terrifying and amazing all at the same time. And we did it. It was me, you, and Kyle, right? And we did it a couple times. It was fun, but your boy... because the first time we went, it was crazy. And you got to jump right on that bubble from 80 feet away or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And then your boy Kyle was not 5 feet from me, and he pops out of the water with a bloody nose everywhere. I was like, damn, man, it was wild, dude. So it was this adventure is what I left you with in my mind, and that's where my memory stays with you. Again, aside the fact that you're amazing and interesting. So let's get into why you're interesting, man, besides all the reasons. Your work in geology is fascinating. So tell me a little bit about how you got started into that, why you were so interested in studying them and also jumping off of them. We've covered that. So what got you into that, man?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I wish it was something a little bit more interesting, but my dad actually gave me the interest. I mean, he was going off to Madagascar and Kenya and Tanzania, going on safaris and looking for oil and gas, basically reserves in the jungle. And he would come back with these wild stories of, just getting stuck, lost in the forest before GPS and all this. And as a kid, you hear stories like that. It's very impressionable. And so I just kind of always grew up knowing I wanted to do geology. And then when I started getting into it, I realized there's a little bit too much math. And I kind of tried and shifted gears to archaeology, anthropology a bit, but then I realized, no, I can do this. And just kept with it. But I think the thing that always drew me to it was getting out to the field. It was going out, looking for rocks, minerals, fossils, and that sort of hobby was really, what how I connected with my dad on this particular point. So, it just kind of kept going. And even with my wife, it was the same thing. We're both geologists. So we traveled a lot around Brazil, looking for mines. And it was the best way to see the culture, see the countryside. And, it was, I don't know, something about it. It was just, getting into nature and holding beautiful rocks all the time. It's hard to beat. So, just kind of like it, I guess,
No, it's interesting and it's so fascinating. And yes, and what you said about your father and how you feel about it is we all think of like Indiana Jones, of course, and then of course Jurassic Park when they're out there digging up that dinosaur. It was so cool. And so these type of adventure things, that's like a childhood thing, man. That's that whimsy. And you're out there putting hands on this stuff and looking at it, like touching it. And I like ancient cultures and the old monoliths and stuff like that. I mean, and the megaliths of the world, it's fascinating to me. I love that kind of thing. And so what's the coolest monolith that you've been to or ancient site that you've been to?
Oh man. Yeah. So when I was in my undergrad, I was in Belize. I went to an archaeological camp in Belize, and we were 5-6 hours away from the nearest city. And there was a big problem with pit vipers out there as well. So, I mean, if you get bit by one of these things, I mean, a helicopter comes in, takes you out, you're going to be dead by the time you get out. So it was a little nerve wracking because you could see them every now and again. But on one of the days I had off, I was out there for about 3 months. And one of the days I went with one of the guys and we hiked down the road. It was all dirt road, obviously paved out secondary forest. And so, you're going through kind of dirty, rocky roads, but just hiking. We didn't have a car at the time because everyone had the cars out on camp, but this was our day off. So anyway, we got out there and you enter into this ancient city. It was called La Milpa. And this ancient city was totally covered in grass and trees. And it was so weird. You walk into it and you look around and you're like, well, where the hell is the city? And then your eye starts to relax and get used to the shadows. And all of a sudden you see that there's hills in the middle of this forest. They're not hills. They're like pyramids. They're covered in dirt and earth, and the forest is just taken over these pyramids. And so it was so wild because, this was a big city. We walked for 3/4 of a mile throughout this city. It was totally covered in dirt and forest, and it was just undiscovered. And I was sitting in it like 6 hours away from the nearest anything. And it was just a very surreal, never forget kind of experience,
Yeah. Well, did you ever report it? Did anybody ever go back and go, you know what, that was undiscovered. We're going to call it Proctorville, and you've got it.
No, it had already been discovered. It just hadn't been fully excavated.
Gotcha.
And so like the way it works is, there were digs that were known, and actually what happens is they go and get pillaged. And so you'll go out to these things that are totally covered, but you'll see looters. They've trenched basically straight into the mine, or straight into the pyramid. And so what they would do is they would just take whatever they could find and then sell it on the black market. And so the archaeologists that were coming in were going in and basically trying to recover whatever they could recover, and also preserve like the layers that they were able to pull out the artifacts, because that tells them something about the age,
Damn, that's cool, man. It's so Indiana Jones. It's so cool.
Yeah, that was a pretty wild story. And what was really neat about it is, of course, there was a vine hanging from one of the pyramids. And of course, we decided to climb up the side of the pyramid, and that was neat. It was really cool, but that was 2004, 2003. That was a while ago now, but still great adventure.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but if you have some pictures of it, I'll put that up in the YouTube as we're talking about it.
Cool.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So YouTube audience, check that out. You're welcome. Jacob sent those. Thank you, Jacob. It's fun time traveling in this way because that's it. I'm asking you now, but we'll get it in the future. But people are seeing now what I asked you for now.
Yeah. You're doing a video recording, yeah.
Time travel. So with all of your adventures, what's been like the one that you didn't think you were going to make it out of?
Ooh. Well, I had a bit of a trick. I got into a bit of a. Well, there was two occasions. One was probably more serious because my wife was pregnant during the occasion, and the other one was probably actually more dangerous. So the more dangerous one was where we were actually, my wife and I were multi-pitching on Cristo. So there's the Big Jesus in Rio de Janeiro. So I lived in Rio for about 4 or 5 years. And during that time, we would go rock climbing throughout the city, and in the neighboring areas. It's got some of the most. It has basically the most amount of urban rock climbing anywhere in the world. And so the Cristo, you can actually climb this thing. And we were going up this climb, and we had another set of partners that were with us, another 2 groups. And one of the groups got stuck on this overhang, and this overhang, it was totally sheer. So if you get over it, you're free. You're hanging in like with 2,000 feet of air below your feet. So you're really suspended. And so we had traversed across this thing, made it fine. And we kept going up, and I was leading this. So, there was no, like, if you fall, it's pretty wretched fall, right? You're protected because you have a partner, but it's not an ideal scenario because of the hanging.
Well, yeah, because of the hanging. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the hanging of the air and no rock to hold on to, that part of it is, yeah. So we got up past this point, and our partners got about halfway through, and they basically froze, and they had to start backing up. And anyway, so they backed up, they made it out, but we kept going up. But my wife's harness started coming loose.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so we had gotten past the crux, which was the hardest part of the climb. And so I was like, yeah, led past the crux, got past it. And, but then this problem with the harness started happening. So I had to bolt myself in, go down to Astrid, help her with her harness. And she's crying at this point because it's scary as shit. And, she gets it fixed back in place. And meanwhile, everyone is below us is crying and going back down. So it was just this big kind of hilarious event, but we ended up getting through it, but it was pretty scary because of that particular component of it. And I think the other one that was more dangerous though was when we got my wife's boat, or my wife's her father's boat. He had a fishing boat. It's not really fully seafaring, but we had gotten on it and decided to boat around this island from the mainland of. We were in this spot in Porto Real is where it was called. It was about an hour south of Rio, and we got onto this boat. Astrid's 6 months pregnant. And I didn't really have that much experience navigating a boat, especially not in open ocean. And so we hit this. I know this is terrible. It's just ridiculous. We hit this corner, and the waves started coming. I mean, these were big waves. They were way over the height of the boat, and they were coming from different directions. And so we're sitting here in the boat and trying to get up these waves, hoping that the motor doesn't drown. And then going down the other side, and 15 minutes into it, I'm like, holy shit, I don't think we can turn around in this. We just have to keep going. I mean, this is not good. This is really not good. I was really regretting it. And anyway, we kept going. It's just terrible. We kept going and made it through. We both threw up when we got through it, just because of the seasickness.
Yeah. No, we all get it. We all get it. Yes, absolutely, because of the seasickness. Yeah. Oh my God.
So we had to recuperate for a little while and just kind of, collect ourselves. But once we collected ourselves, we got to this beach that was on the opposite side of the island, in front of the ocean. There was no one there. We went fishing. We caught these dogfish, these dog-eyed fish, and they were we threw back the first 3 or 4, and then started keeping all the rest because we were hoping to eat the fish that night. So yeah, it was a good experience. It was scary in the moment, but you look back on it and it was really fun.
Dude, insane. I mean, so when does your book come out? Aren't you writing a book about all this stuff?
No,
that's going to then be turned into a movie played by you, and you and Astrid like blow up, but you make it because you're a good couple. That's what I want to see for you.
Well, I mean, the blowing up is a real deal, man. When with kids, and that adds a whole nother stress level to life. You feel like you're blowing up all the time, and it's crazy stuff. But
did you name him anything weird, like a direction of the earth or like a extinct animal?
I named my son. We named him Gawain, which I don't know if like King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Yeah, I've always been kind of interested in Arthurian tale and that sort of thing. So, and then my daughter's Sophie, which is, I guess, not really weird or anything, but it's a fairly popular name, actually.
Nothing short of adorable, of course. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Of course, that makes sense, Jacob. Well, you've got to write this stuff down, dude, and put it in a book. We'll have you back on. We'll get your movie contract worked out. It's all good, This story just has to be told. So, honestly, just tell me another adventure, man. This is wonderful. I've got some other stuff to ask you, but I know my listeners are like, shut the hell up and let the man talk. So please give us another.
Yeah, there was this one time, during the whole mining escapades, where we were going out looking for mines, part of that can be a bit risky. You don't know exactly the people you're going to meet when you get to these locations. And most of the time, everything was pretty relaxed. And there was one time though, where we went to this small town. And this was a tourmaline mining town. And so the tourmalines are quite valuable. They move millions of dollars in tourmalines. every week. I mean, it's a big business there. And so, but they don't see a lot of Americans or really even Brazilians from Rio. So when we showed up in a van, it was kind of this odd situation where we had, in the previous town, we were just randomly going around asking people, do you work with rocks? Like, I mean, seriously, that's what we were doing. Do you work with rocks? No? Ah, darn it. And we had all but given up, and we were filling up the car with gas. And there was just some guy that pulled up with an engineering logo on his truck. I'm like, that's a stretch. Let me just go ask him if he works with rocks. And he turned out he did actually work with rocks. And he was big into like commercial mining of certain types of minerals. And so we said, come with me. And so we basically follow this guy out to his office. And he gets on the phone, introduces us to some guy in this random town, about 8 hours from where we were. And so we long story short, we went out to this town. When we got there, we got to know a couple of the guys. We bought a few things from these guys, got to know their families. And then all of a sudden, the owners of the mines in the area started to catch wind that there was, a gringo there, and there was like a carioca from Rio there. And so all of a sudden, we are being taken up to go meet the Don of one of these mines. And so we head out there to meet this guy, and he invites us to his mine. And so he gives us the tour. We look around, all's good. For lunch, we sit down, we start eating, and he starts talking in front of all the miners, by the way. He starts talking about how, when miners steal from him, he kills them. And I was like, yeah, that's a little creepy.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, a little creepy. So I was like, this is probably not an ideal situation to be in. And he starts talking about, and by the way, he's right by, the governor of the city. So like they're both kind of co-owners in this mine. And they're like, yeah, 10 years ago, there were no rules. Now we're a lot more, we got a lot more rules now. But I'm thinking 10 years ago, yeah, that's not really that long.
No, they're probably still skin on the bones back there. That's crazy.
Yeah. So he's like, anyway, come on, let's go have a look at my other mine. And he takes us down into this other mine, and they're setting up, blasting charges. Like the guy, I have this great picture. I'll have to send you the great picture of this guy with a helmet on with like a candle. He's got a candle here. He's got dynamite right here. He's got wicks right here. He's got empty cartridges right here. And he's got a bunch of stuff in the rock all around me. And I'm like, whoa, I should probably get this picture and get out of here.
Yeah, I would say so. That's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So for the YouTube audience, again, we'll just throw these things up as you send them to me. So we'll work out a slideshow thing here.
Sure.
It's incredible, man. And you and your wife also own a rock shop in Katy, Texas.
Yeah. We have, it all kind of spun off from these adventures in the mines. And at the time, the original owners to the Katy Rock Shop, Bruce and Carol Huff, they were interested in finding what some crazy gringo could, some crazy American could bring back for them that's living in Brazil at the time. And so they asked us, can you export some rock for us? And so that set us off on a second. And we went on many different adventures looking for these mines, but on some of the last 2 years, the adventure started getting a little bit more serious, where we were starting to buy stuff in more larger volumes, and we shipped to him. And so over a few years, I came back to Houston for grad school work, and during that time, I had stopped working in the energy sector, and so I was more focused on how do I make a little bit of money while I'm a poor old student, So we pushed this rock and mineral thing quite hard as another business called Gems in the Rough. And so that over time, it Bruce and Carol, they got to a point where they were ready to close and just kind of retire. And we had been working with them for so many years. We'd gotten to know them quite well. And And so that the opportunity arose for us to kind of pick up the mantle. And so we picked it up a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, just before COVID hit, actually, 3 months before COVID, which is another kind of story in of itself, right? But every business owner has got some wild ride stories on how to adapt during the whole COVID deal. And so we the shop is located in Old Town Katy, Texas, so just on Pin Oak, north of I-10. So the big Katy Mills Mall and that big American Furniture Warehouse. It's right there, tucked into an old single family building. It doesn't look like a store at all, but anyway, so we have specializations in minerals coming out of Brazil, and my general expertise is in the area of reefs. So we have these old microbialites, which in microbialites, stromatolites are the oldest living known life form on Earth, and frankly, they think it's the most probable extraterrestrial life form that will be discovered is actually microbial life of some kind, probably on Enceladus and on Saturn.
Yeah.
But
or so Europa and Jupiter.
What's that?
Europa on Jupiter, the ice sheet around the outside, they think there's liquid water under it, like an ocean, and they can just drill down there. And if you believe space is real, then that's cool. That's really cool. I like that. But yeah, Enceladus, man, there's a ton of exoplanets and moons, even like you said, out there that could harbor microbial life like that. And that would be an amazing find, right? That'd be a step in the right direction.
It would be just totally. It would be totally mind blowing to know that life can evolve outside of Earth. Just the fact that it can do it, I think, would be the biggest revelation to humanity,
Oh, we're going to segue into aliens right now. So what's your thought? Go.
Well, I think it's improbable that there isn't alien life form of some kind. I mean, there's numerous, quantitative approaches that have been developed to try and understand the probability of these things. And it's whether how developed the life forms actually are, and whether they would have advanced technology. That becomes a little bit harder to wrap your head around because, there's so much distance in space that for even an incredibly advanced civilization would have a mind-blowingly difficult time to make it out of their galaxy and into another location. You need to have some totally non-existent technology that just doesn't exist now. Like it could be wormholes or things like this,
Yeah, from our perspective, absolutely. Well, that we're being told, right? Because there's a lot of different ways we could splinter with this, but we'll go with the basic one. So if the universe is 14.5 billion years old, something like that, the Earth is only 4.5 billion years old by that model. So therefore, there's been a lot of extra time for life to not only develop elsewhere, but develop more technologically out there. So to answer your question, that is one of the biggest retorts on this is, well, with the vast distances in space and everything like that, how are they traversing that? Because that's not a known technology. Well, I would add to that, it's not a known technology to us.
Exactly.
So it is absolutely entirely possible that the reason that extraterrestrials or any other life form would come here from any distance at all, no matter how perceivably vast from our perspective, then the answer to that question would be because it's not hard for them. They just do it. Kind of like how an ant marvels at us for being able to get in a car and drive off. It's the connections cognitively just aren't there for us to be able to comprehend that sort of technology. And it's like, I always forget this. This is the one I try not to forget. But anyway, it's any advanced technology to a primitive society would be indistinguishable from magic. And I know somebody's yelling the answer out there. Just comment me. Thank you guys very much. And that's the truth, man. It's we don't know what the hell it is. And to further that point, that's just the extraterrestrial element of it. That's a small sliver, a small surface level layer. That's where everybody starts, and then you get into like interterrestrials and a hollow earth theory, and then you've got the lizard people and interdimensionals, which is really, really cool, and then future humans coming back in time machines. I love all of them, man. I think it's so much fun. And it's because I think that these kind of ideas arise is because people are just trying to figure it out. Science hasn't recognized it as a science, so we don't have any money or time or energy behind it other than what independent people are willing to commit to the study of this on their own. And this is why you get so many amazing theories with it. It's kind of this odd deal. We might get more firm theories fed to us by mainstream science, but I mean, with all the other cool theories, it just opens your mind to the possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, like Jules Verne is a great example. I mean, he was almost soothsayer like with what technology he was able to predict. And in many cases, a lot of people believe that technology often arises because of the stories and the fantasies that get created ahead of it. And so, I mean, I absolutely agree with you on that for sure.
It's just so cool, and it'll just blow your mind thinking about it. And that's a lot of what this show is about, man. We've got cool stories from adventures from around the world, which I'm glad to add, man. I mean, you're just so cool again. It's just cool to catch up with you, brother, and to see that you're doing so well. Okay, well, then what are your thoughts on extraterrestrials? I mean, is that your favorite theory that they're coming from other planets, or have you heard any other things, or have you entertained any other thoughts on it?
I think that if they are traveling here, and I mean, given all the new evidence coming out, I mean, I think that there is fairly compelling evidence that there is technology, you know, like wandering around, and it probably contains aliens, but it could just be drone technology from other other areas, right? I mean, if they're coming through wormholes or parallel dimensions, you know, through quantum theory or some other, you know, physics that we haven't understood, which is more likely what's happening. If they're coming through some other physics we don't understand, then more likely it's something to do with parallel dimensions, or wormholes. And yeah, it just seems that you know, antimatter is something that could eventually be harnessed if technology was developed enough. You know, you could potentially hold open wormholes if that technology was really understood. And we fantasize about it now, but that doesn't mean the science won't be there eventually.
I mean, from our perspective, it's kind of like a manatee creating CERN. You know, we just don't, the gap in understanding that we've got, I think, between what we're capable of doing and even comprehending is nowhere near what they can just walk outside and whittle, like the equivalent to us just grabbing a stick and whittling it. You know, it's that quick and seamless for them because they operate in a different dimension, is one of the thoughts, is one of the ideas. So with everything going on with disclosure right now, I mean, do you think that it's possible that we'll see alien contact in your lifetime? Or that the U.S. government will recognize it?
Fuck, I hope so, man. I hope so. You know what else I hope? I hope that it becomes accessible to actually get into space. I think I would be happy if I were to die knowing that there was people in mass going into space. You know, I think something about that would mean I've lived through one of the most important eras of mankind, I think.
Absolutely.
You know?
Man, I gotta have you on with David Weiss, man. Do you know who that is?
You know, the name's actually familiar. Let me look it up. I'm gonna have to look this up. Tell me about David.
Please look this up while we're talking about it, because I want to see your reaction when you realize who this guy is. Because I want to have you, a planetary scientist, talk to this guy, because you know, the understandings of reality is something I've really been playing with a lot lately on different ideas about what this place is, you know, and then you go through the simulation idea, which Amy Belair and I just had a great conversation about on the show. And you go through all of these different ideas and you eventually land on David Weiss.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see who he was?
Yeah, flat earth theory, I see.
I would love for you two to sit down, because what he loves is people like you, that it's erroneous. There's no fucking way. Like that's the kind of guy he wants to talk to. Cause I'm sitting there going, yeah, NASA's lying to us. And he was just like, oh man. And for him, it's more fun to talk to people like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love engaging on controversial topics. So it's always fun. You know, I mean, a lot of people have an interesting perspective, and you should hear it out. You know, it can change the way that you've developed your own perspective on, you know, the truths that you understand, you know?
See, guys, I told you it was cool as shit. That's the idea. That's the science mind that we need right now, man, is that kind of conversation right there. And we've been doing a lot lately about where the philosophy meets the physics, where the spirituality meets the science. You know, we've been really trying to integrate and marry the two, are actively doing it, successfully doing it. So having folks like you, the open mind that you do, man, it's a big deal. So working with all the rocks that you do, have you So there's, of course, a New Age movement, and I'm sure that you guys facilitate some of that in your shop that you have about the power of crystals, the different things that they do, the different healing properties and modalities. Do you dabble into that at all?
So my wife is getting into it a lot more. I mean, where I haven't actually gone too deep down into it. I mean, I understand kind of, the general idea is that the rock has a chemical compound, and certain elements that make up the rock can enhance, the human ability to deal with, negative or positive forces, basically. So like a conductive rock, you might be malachite, which allows you to channel certain energies because it's a conductive rock and it's filled with copper, and which is a conductor, right? And so there's certain components of metaphysics which I find really interesting, because what they've done is they've actually evaluated the true elemental characteristics that make up a compound, and they're saying that if you get this in enough concentration, or if you apply this to certain areas, then this can actually give you physiological benefits. And I don't think that's really an altogether new thing. I mean, this is something that people have meditated, that are deep into meditation. They are able to create a lot through meditation, and they're not necessarily using a conductor of some kind. They study it for decades, but I feel like the metaphysical, imbuing properties into rocks in this way, it can help to channel, some of these meditative healing, processes that normally takes people many years to get. And so I think that's kind of what the field of metaphysics is really doing, is it's allowing people in a more accessible way to find, to find help, or to find healing, or to find strength, or whatever it might be. I mean, all the different elements have different attributes that can, augment our moods or our general physiology. And so I think there's a healthy amount of mythology, which is really required to make anything work in the human psyche. And then there's also that true component where there is actually elements in some of these rocks that can help you. Like, for example, amber, actually, if you look at the chemistry of amber, it does give off chemicals. It excretes chemicals from the amber. And so if you have children that are cutting teeth and they're feeling pain, then the amber gives off like a pain suppressant, a natural pain suppressant that can actually can help with the teething process. And that's not really as a metaphysics talking. I'm talking like chemically speaking. It does go into your body. And it can actually help with with minor. It's not a huge amount of pain, but it's enough to actually calm the infants down while they're cutting their teeth. So we did for both of our kids, and it helped.
That's amazing.
And so some different minerals have stronger attributes. Some that actually really properly manifest.
And to the amber in the mouth thing, I mean, it could be a couple of things. And this is kind of a point I wanted to make as well, is that maybe it's just psychological for the babies, because now they have something else in their mouth to think about and to interact with, rather than their wound or them feeling bad or something like that, or them the teething process, which is painful, right? So another thing is like, to all this metaphysical stuff, man, right? A lot of people look at it as woo-woo. A lot of people get a ton from it, which kind of leads me to the conclusion, like I've said a while now, that reality is literally what you make it and what you think it is, on all levels. So even dichotomies exist in a dualistic universe in such a way to where it just always complements exactly what you want to experience here, is one idea. Now, whenever you talk about this being a mindset or a dichotomy, just like anything else, like and we need that psychologically, just as whatever we are, then to the people who believe that the rocks do something, there could be an element of a placebo effect. There could be, because there's a story wrapped up into it, because there's some mythology, like you said, there's something to engage in and interact with intellectually, and then that allows you spiritual freedom, which is wonderful. I mean, I think that's great. Now, but I like the fact that you're talking about actual science that is really involved in these minerals and different properties like that. So what's another cool one?
So another mineral that I really like is tourmaline, obviously, because of the experiences we had going through Minas Gerais in the center of the country of Brazil. And but the minerals themselves are just beautiful. They come in a variety of colors, pink, green, blue, and they have this watermelon color as well. But they create the most spectacular specimens. I'm not certain about the metaphysical properties of those guys, but in terms of just natural beauty, they're really a fantastic mineral. And the stories as well of where you find them and the people that surrounding these things are what makes them also pretty neat too.
Yeah, and that's a shirt you should make for your shop or sell it online or something like that. And it just on the front it says, "Do you work with rocks?" And on the back it says, "I work with rocks." And then just sell that from your story earlier. Well, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, tell me about the work that you're doing now.
So at the moment I'm working for the service company, so Halliburton, in the oil and gas industry, and we're working quite a bit with actually we image rocks with CT scanners, and then once we have these volumes, these image volumes that have been created, we try and understand the properties of the rocks. And what's been interesting about this is the industry is actually moving in the direction of carbon sequestration, which is actually I'm really excited to hear about, because it's all the technology surrounding carbon sequestration and doing it right is well evolved in the oil and gas industry. And so it can be
carbon sequestration is you sequestering carbon?
That's right. So the idea is that we need to take carbon out of the atmosphere and bring it either back into the biology of the earth, so the trees and the forests, or we need to bring it into the oceans and let it kind of get out of the atmosphere that way. And then the third way and the best way is to permanently bury it in the ground, in the subsurface. Because when it gets into the subsurface, it can be trapped there for millions of years, and effectively it's brought out of the carbon, out of the carbon sink, basically. And this is kind of the goal. The problem is we have too much CO2 in the atmosphere, which is creating a reverberation between the upper atmosphere and the ground. And so this heat just kind of cycles and it can't escape because the CO2 traps it, right? And the CO2 and the methane. And so what the utility companies and the oil and gas companies and the governments are now pushing is that, tax credits are going to be provided to those that are showing their carbon neutral or carbon negative. Not carbon negative. Carbon neutral is about as good as what a lot of people can get to at this point. But some of these technologies, like geothermal, as an example, can really help to, in certain parts of the world where geothermal is possible to actually be used, you can create some sustainable energy that way. But the carbon sequestration, the goal is we need to get CO2s out of the atmosphere and into a safe place where they're not going to cause heat, not cause the earth to continue warming. And so that has been kind of an interesting, change in the industry. Everyone all of a sudden is it's not a surprise given the politics of what's been going on recently and the reality of global climate change, right? So this is all something that has to be mitigated through science because it's been created by us. So we have to fix the problem.
There's a lot of experts on the other side with a ton of data that say that humanity does not have the carbon footprint that we think that we do, that the Earth is actually handling it, adapted to it, and is absorbing it just fine. And it's actually cooler than this time a long time ago, in like thousands of years ago, where there was no humans emitting any level of carbon at all, other than like their fires or something like that. And I don't think they were doing any kind of damage like that. And it was hotter back then. So a lot of people would argue that this is just a cycle that the Earth goes through. This is not that this has to do with solar cycles. This has to do with where we are as we traverse around in our galaxy, around the outside there or whatever.
Milankovitch cycles, yeah.
Oh, of course you knew, asshole.
Yeah,
you handsome son of a bitch.
So it's paleoclimatology. So this is an entire field that's budding. It's blossoming right now, and a lot of the work is actually happening. I mean, there's a lot of work happening in different places, but when in grad school, they were really focused on this. And so I'm going to draw something real quick here. So this is let's call this present day. So over here you have well, you're not gonna be able to see this. So over here we have present day. And if we go back in time, we can see that, yes, there are proxies for the temperature of the earth, and they oscillate. And they oscillate according to a lot of varying input parameters. So part of it has to do with how many glaciers are on the surface of the earth. Part of it has to do with the position of the continents, because the continents have been moving. And so when the continents have fully separated, it's created ocean circulation cells. And that's only really happened in the last, I think it's basically since the Eocene. It's been about, I don't want to say this on the podcast, I might get it wrong. But
just say a number, dude. People blast you in the comments. Go for it.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, it'll make people look it up and try and prove you wrong. And so they'll learn something new. So go ahead, just say a number. Say 5. Who gives a shit? Yeah,
the big event that we are studying, I mean, paleoclimatologists are studying, is the PETM boundary, the Paleo-Eocene boundary. Is at that point, the Earth actually had very similar rates of increase in CO2 as we're having now. And so what paleoclimatologists are trying to do is they're trying to understand what are the mechanisms that caused the CO2 and the Earth to heat up at the same type of rate that we're experiencing now. And there's no other period of time in geologic history where we're seeing this kind of elevation, except for that one moment in time at the PETM boundary. And so, but the reality is you're right. Every 11 to 12,000 years, we often cycle between warmer and cooler climates. So the last glaciation, we came out of the last glaciation at around 11, 12,000 years ago. So right around 10,000 BC, coincidentally, right when farming and all this stuff started blossoming in the human civilization. And so, from 10,000 BC to about 30,000 BC, that was an ice age that was going on. And then before that, it was another warmer period. And so there's different, if you can think about climate change, it's a function of Milankovitch cycles, which operate on like 160,000 year cycle. And so when you get the solar systems moving around and causing changes in the climate, we're talking like really long intervals, like these are really long wavelength changes. But what can happen is that you get a warm event or a cool event during these, you can be at a peak or a trough of a Milankovitch cycle. And when that happens and you have other factors that are compounding, then you can get exaggerated situations that can cause massive extinction events. And so that's and you can see this. You can see the compounding effect of different factors like volcanic activity. So volcanic activity is usually associated with plate tectonics. If you have more plate tectonics, you're having a more active ridge in the center of the ocean, which is you're creating rock. And while it's doing that, it's giving off CO2 and methane and sulfuric acid. I mean, there's all kinds of very bad greenhouse gases that come out. And so that's why plate tectonics and volcanism is associated with, climate change as well. Then you get catastrophic things like asteroids coming in, blocking out the light and throwing off the climate cycle that way. And so actually the reality is that, there are cyclical changes that happen, but they happen at longer length scales, longer time scales than what we're observing now. And so what you can actually see, what you can measure in Mauna Loa volcano in Hawaii, they've been taking fairly accurate greenhouse gas readings since the 50s. And so the paleoclimatologists, they study climate change based on this data that goes back to the 50s. And so they can see the concentrations of greenhouse gases rise over time. And the concerning part is that it's not like a shallow ramp, right? It's like a hockey stick. It's like this. And the problem is just the science, is that if you have CO2 in the atmosphere, the sunlight can get through it. It hits the concrete, heats up, bounces up. It gets reflected back because of the CO2, acts like a reflection, an insulator. So it just starts getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And so and the CO2 builds up, and we're adding more and more as humans. And so the only solution is we have to take it out of the atmosphere, and you can put it in the oceans, but then it can cycle back out to the atmosphere. You can put it in the forest, but then the forest dies and decays and actually puts out, puts out CO2, methane, every problem that you get with decaying forest, that's happening. So there's actually studies showing that it may not even be the right solution to reforest the earth because of the problem of decaying. I mean, it's going to help, of course, but I mean, really the only solution we have as a species is to get it into the ground, and pronto. And so I'm excited to see that the oil and gas industry is taking this shit seriously. And frankly, the industry needs people that are conscientious about these things. And so I feel like, any advances that I can take, that I can help to better the world, and it actually gives me relevance and more meaning in life,
Yeah. Why can sunlight go through the CO2 and to Earth, but not bounce back the other way? Is it only reflective on the inside?
Yeah. So what happens is you have strong sunlight that hits the earth, right? And as it hits the earth, some of that sunlight bounces back, and some of it makes it through. And so what happens is not all of it makes it through. It's not totally a mirror, right? So some of it does get through, but some of it reflected, right? And so what happens is that passes through, it hits the ground, it comes back up, and some of it gets through, but some of it bounces back. And so as you increase the concentration of CO2, this thin layer starts to thicken, and it becomes more like a mirror at some point. And so at some point, the CO2 gets so thick that it actually reflects off the earth. The sunlight reflects off the earth. That's when you get like a volcanic explosion, and you've got a very thick layer. But you can have a situation where the CO2 gets denser and denser and denser. And because the molecules are densely packed, they're more efficient at refracting that sunlight back to Earth. And so it creates that thermal runaway effect where things start heating, and it heats and it exaggerates, and you add concrete, it reflects better, and you lose forests, it's reflecting more. And so there's many different feedback loops ultimately that's tied to this situation.
Kind of like what happened on Venus. It was a runaway greenhouse effect, right?
Yeah.
Where it's covered in clouds because it's hotter than Mercury. Isn't that accurate? Isn't that what they tell us?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. The Venus, they think at some point in time, was more habitable. Obviously, its temperature is like 800 or 900 degrees centigrade or something. It's totally inhospitable. I think only the Russians have landed on Venus officially, and so they have pictures, I think, from the 70s or something. It's really interesting to see. But I mean, there's a lot that's not really understood about Venus. I mean, I don't think really anyone really knows what happened there. There was some feedback loop, which is possible to occur on Earth, that happened, and it got run away, and all of the water evaporated. And so it could have had something to do with sunspots potentially. I mean, there's a variety of things that could have happened. Solar flares, it's much closer to the sun, and so this would have a much stronger impact. But science really doesn't know exactly what happened on Venus, as far as I understand.
And what I think is interesting, and what I think is interesting is a lot of people say what you say about it, and then some other people say that there's a guy named Valiant Thor that came from there, and that he was helping our military with stuff, and he was a really cool guy. And there were like 4 people. It was like 2 dudes, 2 chicks, and they came from there, and they all lived on Venus, and everybody's way cooler than us, and they're big, and they got big hands and shit.
It's like John Carpenter on Mars. I mean, I love that story.
It's a good story. Yeah.
Such a good one. But the reality is that something like that
could happen on Earth. And something like that probably also happened on Mars. I mean, they do believe, I mean, there is water on Mars, not a lot left. And they haven't really discovered any big lakes or anything other. In the poles, they've discovered some very large bodies of water, but they're not very thick is the problem. And they don't really have, there's not really the right atmospheric conditions for it to warm up, to become fluid. So, you know, on Earth, the thing that can happen, and I'll give you a scenario here. You hear about the glaciers calving and breaking off and melting and all this situation. I mean, this is a serious situation because have you gotten a glass of warm water and put a really big ice cube in it, and it's not very effective, right? When you smash up that ice into itty bitty little pieces and you put it in that warm water cools off really quickly, and that ice just goes away. And that's because of the surface area. So if you increase the surface area of something, it's going to react more quickly. So smaller, try this when you get a chance, break up the ice, put it in a warm glass of water, and then in another glass of water, use a big ice cube, put it in there, and just watch how quickly each one melts. And so that happens, that phenomenon is happening with glaciers right now. And so as things break up, they melt even quicker. And as they melt quicker, they change the density in the oceans. And that causes the circulations in the oceans to actually change because they're driven by density change and temperature change. So the top water is warmer and it sinks and the cold water comes up in the poles. And this drives, you know, circulation cells in the oceans. But when the fresh water comes into the oceans, it changes the density contrast, the circulation slows down, and then all of a sudden the water starts warming up even more. And so when the water warms up more, you get more evaporation in the atmosphere, and then you get more reflections and things start heating up. And so then what happens, and what is already happening, is the permafrost. When we start seeing the permafrost melt, that's the permafrost melting is not actually the problem. The problem is all the dead stuff in the permafrost, because you've got like 30,000, 40,000 years of dead stuff that hasn't decayed yet. And that is a carbon sink. So if the temperatures keep warming, we can get to a point, and I hope I never see this point in my lifetime, but we could get to a point where the permafrost starts to melt. You get increased CO2 entering into the atmosphere, methane from all that decay, increases the temperature even more. All the glaciers melt, all the permafrost melts. You get into a runaway effect where the temperatures get too warm, and then the oceans start to stratify. They stop moving. And that's when that happened once in geologic history. It's happened really one big time. It was called the Permo-Triassic extinction. And it was where basically 99% of all life on Earth died. All life. And the Earth became a snowball. It was covered in ice. But right before it became covered in ice, it was really warm and the oceans stopped circulating. And so this is kind of this strange feedback loop that can happen with the different biomes in the Earth trying to rebalance other biomes when they're being impacted by, external effects like, temperature changes, more droughts, heavy rains. The biome reacts to these things. And so all of these things participate in this reacting to CO2. And that is the problem. So we need to get CO2 out of the atmosphere. that's the key thing that needs to happen in the next 10 years.
All of that could totally be true, but I'm just so glad that I know that the Earth is flat and that we don't have to worry about any of this stuff, and all of it's just a big lie to funnel money. It's a big money laundering scheme, and that's all this is. So, but no, it's fascinating, man, and I love science talk like this. So it's very cool. We haven't done this like this on the show yet, and I'm truly grateful, man. So yeah. I did want to ask you while you're here, if you had looked into, as a geologist, I'm sure you're interested in the Sphinx, and did you see the weathering that Dr. Schock found, Dr. Robert Schock and Anthony West? Have you heard of this?
I lived in Egypt for like 5 years, and I got to see the pyramids and the Sphinx when I was a kid. But I have not heard what you're talking about. Tell me about it. What
Really?
happens?
Okay. So Anthony West, basically a while back, I don't have dates. This is the best I can do is just a breakdown for you. He surmised after just observation of the Sphinx. He's not a scientist. He just had really good observation. And he looked at it and said, well, the weathering on the enclosure, the side walls of the Sphinx where the bricks were allegedly hewn out of, then rearranged and shaped to build the Sphinx out of. So the enclosure walls had these distinct markings on it that he surmised was water erosion. But the problem with that idea is they say that was the Sphinx of Khufu, right? And then, but that was only 3,500 BC, something like that. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure, but yeah, the dates of the Sphinx go back around to that timeline, I think.
And but the problem with that idea is the established Egyptian idea is that the water erosion, the way that it looks, Egypt didn't have water like that for but 12,000 years ago. So it makes the Sphinx at least a lot older than it was. So the other thing is how the head of the Sphinx and the shoulders and everything look to be very disproportionate to the actual physiological makeup of the lion below it, right? So what they think happened, and one of the ideas is that used to be a lion, and it actually used to face, of course, the constellation Leo on the summer solstice, and that was around the time where all that water was occurring. It was a very lush, very abundant with life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, but that says, though, that the pyramids are way, way older, and at least, if nothing else, the Sphinx for sure. And it's very interesting weather erosion. I'll send you a video, man. Robert Schock, he's fascinating. He's written amazing shit. He's a fascinating dude. So he's a geologist that went over there at the behest of Anthony West, and they looked at it, and he did this whole thing, and he's been like banned from over there and stuff. People don't want to talk to him. All the Egyptologists are pissed off because Zahi is Hawass. We don't have time to go into that, dude. But I'm also curious about, so if you haven't seen that, I'll send you something, and I'll link something down in the show notes for anybody else curious. Also, what do you think about the idea that the pyramids were actually electricity conductors? They were gigantic power plants. They utilized piezoelectricity under the ground, a long way under earth, and there's a big aqueduct underneath there. And the tunnels don't make any sense, but then when you kind of apply the principles that Tesla was talking about the energy everywhere, but then they were harnessing actual piezoelectric properties, then yeah, one could surmise that was some sort of ancient power plant. What do you think about all that?
I don't know. I mean, it seems as though that it's an awful lot of effort to build the pyramids and for them to not have some other purpose other than being a tomb.
Well, they weren't a tomb. No bodies were ever found and no inscriptions were ever found. There was one inscription found, but it was proven to be fake and graffiti from a guy who went up there just wanting to make a name for himself. No.
Oh, you're talking about the Sphinx?
Yeah. No. The pyramid, the Great Pyramid. So no inscriptions whatsoever, and no bodies were ever found in the pyramids. So therefore, that also lends more credence to the idea that they were not for burials. And because if you look at other tombs, they're very ornate. They tell the story and the lineage and all that. They're adorned with gold, even though some of them have been looted, like you talked about in Brazil. But that idea, though, that no bodies were ever found, no graffiti, no markings of any kind, nobody claimed it. Even Egyptians from a long time ago would say these were here when we got here. We showed up and this was already here. So there's no real claim to the building of the pyramids, which is interesting too.
Yeah. I mean, I studied a little bit on the Ptolemy dynasty, but they were the ones that built the Great Library of Alexandria. Like there was a line of Egyptian. I don't even think, I guess he was a pharaoh. But that was more in the like 80 BC timeline up until 100 AD. So right around the time of Christ, I think. But before that, I don't know a lot about the origins of the pyramids. I mean, obviously I've heard many stories about what, some of the different theories out there, but I don't really know enough about it, honestly.
Yeah, it's all theories, but I mean, when you factor in the water erosion, when you factor in the piezoelectricity that can be noted and duplicated, and then the fact, of course, they were not burial chambers, no inscriptions, all of these things lead up to that their purpose was for something else. And also, if you look into the properties of the obelisks and how those are all over the planet, it could be some sort of interconnected sort of grid, that's tapping into an energy that we don't know about, but I'm sure some of us at high power, maybe energy companies, maybe your lizard bosses over at Halliburton, they probably know about it. Yeah.
Could be.
So, my friend, we'll probably wrap it up here, man, but I just wanted to throw a couple geologically centered kind of crazy, zany, high strangeness ideas at you there. So those are fun,
Yeah. But about the point about the obelisk, that reminds me of dragons, right? I mean, dragons are kind of a common theme in civilization. You see them occurring in different parts of the world that were totally isolated from one another. And so you have to ask yourself, like, were there really dragons, or is there something in humanity that can see dragons, but not? Is the dragon a stretch for something that humans want to see, that we see because we are innately human? And so I guess my point is that, maybe these structures like the obelisk, which occur in different locations, and maybe they're driven by something deeper in us that we don't understand. And maybe that theme is associated with, something organized, or maybe it's just something human. Maybe the structures are human. Just they define us. Dragons define us and our escapism of the world.
Yeah, I totally believe dragons existed, but I think the obelisks are penises, dude. It's a phallic symbol of power.
Yeah.
But also, it was probably like a power conductor or something like that, or a receiver, something like that, because of the fact that they cross cultural boundaries. Like a bunch of different cultures did it, which says that it may not have necessarily been a deity because they practiced different religions, they practiced different beliefs. So that didn't connect them. What did connect them is similar structures, the three windows in pyramid shapes, steps, flat top, whatever. That design was always utilized. They were utilized in specific grid patterns with water flow underneath them, which again speaks to the piezoelectricity property that they were probably utilizing. And then you have the fact that they had to have been at that point then practical rather than symbolic. But I totally dig the dragon thing. I love that. I want to talk to you about your weird fascination about that later whenever you come on another time. Okay.
Sounds great.
Something going on
Brandon.
There. Hey,
thank you.
Well, do you want to be found? Do you want me to link anything, or you want to tell people how to find you and your rock shop, man? I'll definitely link that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to come over and talk rocks with me, or my wife, or any of the guys at the Katy Rock Shop, come out and visit us. Just in Old Katy, north of I-10 on Pin Oak Road, 535 Pin Oak Road. I'll see you there.
Damn, what a plug. That was profesh as fuck, dude. You sound like a radio ad. So that'll be like $50, dude. We'll work it out. No, and I'll link all that in the show notes, guys. Thank you, Jacob, dude, so much. You're fascinating, man. We'll definitely have you back on. This has been a lot of fun, dude. I'm gonna get you hooked up with David Weiss, and we're gonna make you a flat earther, and I'm gonna be here for it. It's gonna be great.
Sounds great. Great. That sounds good.
Jacob Proctor, thank you, my friend.
Have a great one. Have a great weekend as well.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, a massive thanks to Jacob Proctor for coming on the show. Ladies, I know what you're thinking. He already said it. He's married, so settle down. None of that, please. All the ways to find him, of course, will be linked in the show notes, guys. Jacob is awesome. Go check out his rock store in Katy there if you live in the area, or check him out online. They have a wonderful website, which will be linked in the show description as well. Also linked down there is the direct contact to expandingrealitypodcast.com. That is where the links to all of the socials. That's where you can do all of it. It's kind of a central hub for everything. We're working on some merch, so stay tuned for that. If you want to support the show, Patreon is on there as well, and we are truly grateful for that. Liking and sharing is the best way, and so continue to do that. Thank you guys so much. For your week this week, guys, go out into it and pick up a piece of litter. Let's keep this planet a little bit better than we find it, and just be nice to everybody that you see. Buy a meal or a book of stamps or a cup of coffee or something like that to any stranger that you meet. If you're in line behind somebody, they got a bottle of water or something, just buy it for them, man. It's a big deal. And get out of that left-hand lane, of course. We are in Texas, and we hate that. Jacob, shout out. You're out of the left-hand lane, and I appreciate it. As well as you guys just remember above and beyond anything else. Just go out into your week this week and y'all just be good to one another. Thank y'all so much for listening. We'll see you next time.